Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. My name's Anna. I'm a genetic counselor at CHOP. And today with Kristin, we're going to be giving a little bit of an extended update on some of the STARR data. Some of it will probably be the same as some of what Ingo said. Some of it will be a little bit different. I hope it's informative. So, I'll be on this side of you. So what are we going to cover today? Got a lot of interested audience members. What is the STARR study? Why is it important? How can you guys participate if you're not already? And then Kristin will talk about some of the things that we've learned so far. So what is STARR? I'm sure you guys all know this, but it's a prospective natural history study, and its goal is really to achieve clinical trial readiness. So that's something I'm going to say a few times, and I'll delve into a little more detail about that in a bit. But what is it kind of in practice? Well, it's a multidisciplinary team. It's you guys coming in for visits, and it's us doing multiple evaluations over a long day in person, testing things like developmental measures, asking you about your medical history, seizure history, doing different exams, and generally asking a lot of questions, both in the form of surveys before the visit and also during the visits. Our main goal is to kind of better define what is STXBP1, what does it look like in the broadest sense, so that we can really give you guys, first of all, just the best care, the best counseling for when we diagnose new families. We can give them, the most clear and definitive information that we can, but also to prepare for clinical trials. So when we think about how we design studies like this, we have to ask, yes, what is important to a doctor or a clinician or what researchers think is important, but we also need to know what's important to you guys. So it's great that we kind of started this endeavor by doing a disease concept model, because that's the exact question that it asks. It asks, what symptoms matter to you? What affects your day-to-day most? What would you want to see changed with something like a gene therapy? I think when you talk to clinicians, seizures are the main thing that tend to come up. They're the thing that's most often measured in clinical trials. But you can see other things rise to the top here when you talk to families. So the kind of longest bars being the things that were most important. We see things like development, behavior, communication skills, GI problems, things like that don't typically get measured in clinical trials, but are things that we really want to look at more closely because they're what's important to you. So if you kind of distilled the whole STARR study down to one slide, this is what it would look like. I think the first step that sometimes we overlook is just recruitment. So we need to reach families, we need to be able to enroll people, and we couldn't have this study without all of you participating. We are already enrolled, over 100 STXBP1 families, so we've reached that goal. But now, just as Ingo said, we want to be able to look at all those participants over time and see, what changes, what stays the same, all that kind of stuff. So that's why it's important that we keep going. You can see in the middle the very long list of things that are assessed during our clinic day. Yes, we're asking about seizures, but we're also taking developmental measures, looking at adaptive skills. So, what are the daily tasks that a person with STXBP1 can do? Things that, are important to their daily life, like putting on clothes or using the bathroom independently, things like that. And then we also do other tests like EEGs or sensors to try to see if we can start to develop other types of markers of disease that we could potentially use in future trials. And then the last question is, what do we do once we have all this data? So first of all, it's important to combine it all between the different sites to make sure we have the biggest collection possible. And then how do we use it? So we can, first of all, give it to researchers, people who are interested in publishing new things about STXBP1. We can also return it back to people like you in presentations like this and tell you what we've learned. And hopefully kind of learn together more about STXBP1. And then the last thing is that we can, also share it with industry partners and people who are interested in developing therapies and moving those forward. So I know you've seen this slide already, but I do really want to emphasize how far we've come. You can see at the top here that just at CHOP, we have almost 120 STXers who we've seen for at least one visit, all the way going down to some people who've had up to their 6th visit, and a 7th will be coming soon. And you can see that because all these lines kind of have the same slope, that we're really not losing a lot of people. People are coming back. They're being really diligent about seeing us, and that's giving us fantastic data to work with. So thank you all for, making this graph look like this. So why is kind of all this important? Why do we do it? It's important to see as many cases as we possibly can. This plot on the right here shows the different age distributions of people in the study. So oldest on the right and youngest on the left. You can see that we have a lot of people between age 0 to 10, but it really starts to drop off after that, and that's what we really want to know. We want to be able to see more people who are older, to help us understand what STXBP1 looks like over time and as people age. And it's important that we understand all these different age ranges to offer better counseling and to be prepared for clinical trials. And I know I've said, clinical trials, clinical trial readiness, but what does that really mean kind of logistically? So when you hold a clinical trial, you need to measure something. And most of the time, the kind of lowest hanging fruit, the easiest thing to measure is seizures, because you can count them. You can say, someone was having 5 seizures a day, they had this therapy, then they had 1 seizure a day, and that's how we know it works. But as you guys have seen so far, not everybody with STXBP1 is having seizures, and it might not even be the most important thing to quality of life. It might be other things like development or adaptive skills. So we want to move beyond just looking at seizures to be able to design other measures. But it can be challenging to measure development. It's something that progresses kind of slowly. Sometimes there might not be huge differences, it might just be small differences. So that's why we do all these tests, to try to find good ways to measure it and to be able to measure those changes over time. And that's really what an outcome measure is. It's how do we measure something that is meaningfully different when we give somebody a therapy. And that's what clinical trial readiness is. It's having those outcome measures available so that we can jump into a clinical trial without having to kind of design them from scratch. So what have we kind of already defined? Like I said, we can look at seizures. There are very, standard developmental measures that Kristin will talk about and that my other colleagues will talk about later today. But we're starting to define other aspects of STXBP1 too, like quality of life, self-care, the EEG markers that we can see, looking at, differences in tremor, all these different types of things that we can hopefully develop great measures for. So if you're not already participating, there are lots of places where you can. We have 5 sites up and running right now, and then a 6th that is on the way to start enrolling. So if any of these are close to you, or if you're able to make it to them, every data point is valuable. Every additional person we enroll in the study is valuable. So please reach out. And I'll hand it over to Kristin.
Thank you. It's so nice to be standing here and seeing faces that have come for many visits at CHOP, some even 6 visits. So thank you again. I think that's the message from our CHOP team is thank you for committing and keep coming to see us. You truly feel like family. So anyway, so if you decide to come to one of our sites, what does it look like? What is a visit? What does it entail? So when you register and your visit is scheduled, you will get a link to complete patient-reported outcomes. They're a separate, they're through a website that you would go to and complete the surveys. They're really caregiver-reported outcomes, and they're so important and interesting because they are things that we are not collecting on the clinic day. And a lot of the domains, you can tell us what a typical day looks like. And we look at things like daily functioning, communication, quality of life, adaptive behavior, sleep quality, GI issues. So a lot of the patient-reported outcomes, although we know that it's lengthy and there are many, they really do tell us things outside of the data that we're collecting on the clinic day. And we use them to learn what isn't measured by providers that see you when you come to the clinic day. And they really tell us what the lived experience is of an individual and a family with someone with STXBP1, which is really the information that we really want to know. And we have you complete the questionnaires close to your clinic visit, because then we can collect the data in the same time frame that your visit is. So we want to know, like, if you're coming and, the individual is a certain age, we want to know what a day in the life of that certain age looks like. And then really, it's the way that you guys can give us a voice and to tell us, like, what are we missing in our child design? What could we be collecting that we're not collecting that's important to you, and to represent what is, important in a typical life. And then when we get the data, we look at it and we analyze it. Again, we're so excited because we're at the point where we're looking at data and we're analyzing data. So these graphs are just representative of data that we've been getting through RareX, which is the patient-reported outcomes, and the scale on your left, the ABC RAW. That's how the Vineland tells us about quality of life, like in a day, or like how outside of the clinic, like what a life looks like adapted behavior. And then the motor skills talks about gross motor, fine motor skills. And then when you come to see us for a day in the clinic, those of you that have been with us, we know it's a really long day. It could be up to 8 hours. But in that 8 hours, you get to see all of us, and you're in the room and we sort of rotate through. And the evaluations that we're collecting are things like the Childhood Autism Rating Scale, the GMFCS for gross motor function, the AIMS, which is also a gross motor function for younger children, the Bailey-4, which is really the test that looks at cognition and expressive language, receptive language, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. We look at the Peabody, which also talks about fine motor skills. So when you come to see us, it's a day, it's things that look very much like games and questions and things like that, just to get a very well-rounded view of what an individual with STXBP1 looks like in all the different domains. And of course, those of you that have been with us know we appreciate the day is long, and the day is yours, we say. So if you need to take a break, you take a break. If you need to eat lunch, if you need to come back up, the day is yours, even though you're at CHOP, or whatever site. So even though the day seems long in the slide, we really kind of work together as a team to get through the day. Hopefully it feels like that. And then these are just some pictures of the assessments. Our assessments as therapists, really, we want it to feel like play and look like play, because that is the job of an individual. And so it's just a way to look at gross motor skills, fine motor skills. And then again, this is just data that we're looking at. This data in particularly looks at the Bailey. The Bailey, like I said, has 5 domains. This is the cognitive age. This is the cognitive domain of the Bailey. Just different data points. And again, each data point representing somebody that's come to the clinic for the day to share the skill levels. And then our psychologists also evaluate for autism. And this has been an interesting finding since people have been coming to our clinic and we've been having a chance to talk about autism and autism concerns. We have found there's a bigger diagnosis of autism in the STXBP1 population than was previously thought when we were doing literature reviews. So again, just saying how important it is to come and share your experience, and then the learning about STXBP1 just becomes broader. And in conclusion, we are still learning with every new participant and at every visit. And so again, we appreciate you coming and taking the time. And then we really hope you guys feel like when you're coming to visit these centers of excellence for STXBP1, that you're meeting and talking with clinicians who have seen a lot of this diagnosis, so you're not feeling like, you got the diagnosis and you got a piece of paper and now no one really knows what it means. We hope you're feeling like we're really experts in the diagnosis. And then we know what's typical for an STXer. And then also when you come and share your story and you say, this really isn't like the typical trajectory, we can work through it. We can add it to our research minds and sort of collect that data as well. And then again, like Anna was saying, really learning what we can target for clinical trials, because that is the end goal. And then what is a meaningful difference in STXBP1? So, the 1 in a millions, if we know the typical trajectory of STXBP1, somebody might come and say, oh, but this one skill seems, different than what the typical development is. But then maybe if that one person comes and then the next person comes and we're able, then it becomes actually not atypical, but then we know more about STXBP1. So again, the message being just thank you for being so willing to share your experience and your stories. And if there's any questions.
Thank you so much. We have time. We have time for 1 to 2 questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's very informative. And I have a question that actually, it's just something I noticed also in the ESCO study. That one of the areas that's not really being, or maybe is missing, or you just didn't present, is the demographic of the patients, yes, and also the socioeconomic
yes,
circumstances. Because, I mean, when we look around, it's not very representative of the whole population of U.S. and other, countries. So.
Yes, yeah. Yes, that's a very great point. And I apologize. That's one of the most important slides that's not included in this presentation, but it was included in some of the research presentations yesterday, and we should add it. We will add it for next time. But yeah, that's a very great point that yes, demographics are not as varied as we would want them to be. So we have our team always talks about it and how we can make it more representative.
Do you want to talk at least about age groups?
Yes, I wonder, so actually we can go back. Anna, do you want to talk about that slide? Yeah.
So I think one of the demographic challenges that probably comes up a little bit more maybe in genetics than it does in other fields is age. And, we know that there are many STXers in the world who are older, but it can be a challenge because there's a lot of adults who don't get genetic testing. Particularly if they have a milder presentation, because, some people, if they had more severe symptoms, their, primary doctor might think about doing testing. They might find out they have STX, they might be able to join. But if there's an adult with kind of milder challenges, they might not pursue that. So it can be a challenge to enroll adults and older adults. It can also just be very challenging to travel. There are, many, many barriers to enrollment. And I think that is something we have to consider when we look at the data of older individuals in our study as well. We have to understand that, for the kids who were just diagnosed, we expect that it's probably more representative of the whole spectrum of STXBP1, but perhaps for the older adults, it's a little bit skewed towards people who are actually able to get a diagnosis as an adult, meaning they might be more substantially affected. But also from the other side of things, if they're very, very affected, they might not be able to travel. So we expect it's a little harder to get kind of the whole spectrum. And I think Sarah wants to add something.
Can I add something really quickly?
Please.
I'm so sorry. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Sarah's baby.
Hello, this is my baby. Hi, everyone. So I also wanted to add that, just wanted to say that we're piloting a program where we're doing remote assessments to see if this is something that helps make our study more representative of the population of the United States. This is a concern for us too, and it's a really good question, as always. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just actually, was it me? Okay.
just maybe more a comment, because it really dovetails onto your excellent question. Have you considered, or would you consider, going to a lot of the autism centers and asking about testing? I find that a lot of children sound like they were misdiagnosed. I know our granddaughter almost was.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering if I understand what Florida's doing with genetic genome testing for all newborns, is that something that will add to your study? Can you make sure that data is getting in? Because I really do think kids are just not diagnosed, and some of the national autism centers might be able to really, look at the symptoms and say, oh, that sounds like STX and we should do a genome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Do you want to go ahead?
yeah, I actually, so I'm thinking a lot of things with your question, which is great. So part of my training at CHOP, so I've been at CHOP for 25 years, and I worked at the center at the Regional Autism Center at CHOP. So we have Dr. Carlin Glatz, who is a developmental pediatrician that's on our team, who also is part of the Regional Autism Center at CHOP, as well as CHOP has like a whole hospital initiative for autism diagnosis through like all our service delivery lines across the enterprise. And so the thoughts were in my head. We partner, Judy Miller is also a PhD researcher that works at the Center for Autism Research. So yes, I think, and if Sarah's still in the room, and Sarah's baby, yes, so just different ways that we can partner with just CHOP as an enterprise, just to sort of, be more aware of that. But yes, I think those were just ideas I was thinking of this week that came up. But Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that particular Florida study that you're talking about too, Jane, is kind of, we've already told them that we want to talk to every newly diagnosed STXer through there. Like, we're connected with the researchers for that study in particular. We're interested in how it shows us, like, what if it changes our estimate of the true prevalence of STX. And it is, and we know that there's still, work to do to get everyone diagnosed, but it's improving across the U.S. gradually, just, and we're as involved as we can be with that too. So.
Yeah, and I'll just say that this is important. Like, these newborn screening type of programs are very new. It's research because, I think all of us probably had our kid with a heel prick for newborn screening, and so this is actually genomic sequencing. There have been STXers who have been identified through newborn screening already, and so it is very new, but it is happening. And I'm sorry, John, we need to go to the next. Okay, go ahead.
So just to let you know that the FDA is thinking about this too, and they have a whole division that is encouraging sponsors or pharma companies to make sure that they get representation also in underrepresented populations. And I did bring it up with them that in order to do that in rare diseases and genetics, we need to do genetics, right? So if somebody is in an underserviced population, their child has a disease and they don't know what it is, we can never include them in the natural history study, and sponsors and pharma companies can never include them in their studies. So it's so important that something like Miami or Florida is happening, because if that is across the board, we will know and they can be included. So it's an initiative, and I would encourage anybody that if you ever see a family and they're not genetically tested, encourage them to get genetically tested.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Kristin.